I'm now going to run through how to complete a urine test chain of custody consent form. This will be included in your chain of custody test, and when you open the cup there should be a consent form like this inside. So this is for a urine test, and so starting from the top, donor, organisation, company. If it isn't already printed on your form when you get it, you should write the word claritest in the top there. That's the name of the laboratory. Then business unit or cost centre. This test was conducted on an employee of Crow Construction of Burnley, so I wrote Crow Construction there, location of test Burnley. They then wrote the postcode for that test address there, and then date of test was 8th of the 6th 2023. So underneath that, donor details, date of birth 29th of the 8th 1985, and then first name and last name David Smith. I've already crossed out some of the things you don't need to put in here. These I've covered up it over here with things you don't need, like donor identification. You know that the person sitting in front of you is the person you're supposed to be testing, so you don't need to put anything about identification of donor there. But underneath that, you will need to say why you've done the test, and the reasons listed here are pre-employment, for cause, post-incident, network rail, random, annual, pre-sponsorship, follow-up, scheduled, LUL or other. And so if you've done a test for another reason, you'll need to put why you've done the test there. It could be, it could be, I don't know, some sort of scheduled testing that you've done. This one here was a for-cause test, so I've ticked the box for cause. I then printed the name and asked the donor to sign after reading the donor consent to test. So I generally read this to the donor rather than ask them to read it. There can't be any misunderstanding when we get to the end of the test when they say they didn't understand the statement, so I read them to it. I read it to them. Medical declaration next. So this person had taken 2 cocodamol 7:30 on the 7th of 6th, so I wrote details of medication taken the last 14 days there. Underneath that, POCT, so that's a point of care test. So when you did your initial first line test, you would have had details on the packaging there. So it was a urine test. The lot number of that kit that I used written there, expiry date there. Was the urine test within range? And I've circled yes, it was between 32 and 38. Was there sufficient sample? Had the person urinate up to the minimum fill volume line that we discussed? Adulteration detected. So as long as there's no adulteration detected, you circle the box there as no. Time of test was 9:30, and I read the test at 9:34. And then you'll need to say whether there's a negative or non-negative result. You're probably only going to be doing this test and send samples off to the laboratory as non-negative, so you'll need to tick the non-negative box. And over on the right hand side, you'll need to say what the person has failed the initial test for. In this case, it was ketamine and cannabis. But if it's one of the drugs that hasn't been listed on here, you'll need to write other there for any other drugs you want the laboratory to test for. Doing a declaration of medication, so they'll need to read and sign and print their name on that declaration there. And you'll need to read, put your name and sign on the collector's declaration. And then underneath that, the only thing left to do is for them to initial and date the 2 tamper-proof anti-tamper seals at the bottom, one marked A and one marked B. They'll need them signed, initialed and dated before we affix those to the vials of urine for sending off to a laboratory. And that's how to complete a chain of custody test consent form for urine.